answer questions.
Welcome, subscribers. I'm Shira Ovide. I write the On Tech newsletter here at the New York Times. My colleagues and I spend a lot of time writing about uninviting and awful conversations that happen on the internet, but we know there are places online where great things happen, where strangers are having open-hearted discussions about issues in their lives, about their hobbies, and even about vaccines. The idea today is to learn from some of the people behind those informative and affirming online communities and talk about how we can get more of them. We'll also hear from an expert in building connections with a large and often vocal crowd. That's the drag performer Latrice Royale. But my first guest is the chief executive of Reddit. More than 50 million people visit Reddit every day. And for those of you who don't know, Reddit's built around thousands of community forums called subreddits. And Reddit over the years has been home to some toxic online communities and also some of the best ones. One example of the latter, a friend of mine recently turned me on to a fun subreddit about koi ponds. Steve Huffman, thank you for joining me. I really appreciate it.
Hi, Shira. Thank you. And hi, everybody. Really honored to be here today.
Let me start by asking you to describe Reddit to an alien who might have just landed on Earth. What is it like, and how do you see Reddit evolving?
Sure. So it's a good question, and I'll describe it to just a human on this planet, because I think we've got plenty of humans who don't know Reddit either. The best metaphor for Reddit, or the best way to understand Reddit, is not to compare it to social media, I think as we know it, but to compare Reddit to a city. Reddit is a large city, the largest city in the world. It just happens to be online. And so cities in real life are built out of cement and steel, but really cities are built by their citizens. And they grow and evolve like organic living creatures. And Reddit is actually very similar. The same way that cities self-organize into neighborhoods that have distinct cultures and vibes, Reddit self-organizes into communities. We call them subreddits. And those subreddits have distinct cultures and vibes. And so on Reddit, everything is created by our users. Those communities I just mentioned are created by users, their rules, their culture, the content within them, the ranking of the content within them. That's all done by people, right? The citizens of Reddit. And so in this regard, Reddit is I think, the most human place online. And so all of, I think, the things, all the interesting things that have come out of Reddit are really a byproduct of people being together. And so our subreddits, we have thousands of them, as you mentioned, and many of them cover things that would be very familiar, news and sports and politics. We've got a lot of subreddits for internet culture and weird things. Of course, it is the internet after all. And then we've got a lot of communities that may not have great representation elsewhere online and sometimes offline, places where people turn to for support. Like, let's say you're a new parent, or you're going through a relationship challenge, or you're struggling with your sexuality and you are maybe embarrassed or afraid to turn to your friends and family, or you're trying to get over a drug or alcohol addiction. Personally, I built a new relationship with Reddit 2 years ago when I quit drinking through our Stop Drinking community. And I think I would not have been successful doing that without receiving so much support and hearing people's stories of their own journeys. And so Reddit it's a special place, and it's a human place. And I can't say we designed it, but I feel very thankful to have had a front row seat while it's grown and evolved.
Steve, it's really interesting. When I talk to people who run groups on Reddit or elsewhere on the internet, they consistently tell me that it's essential to have two things. The first is, a really strong set of rules for people who are on the forum, in their community. And the second is having, effective moderators or administrators to kind of make it run and keep things on the straight and narrow. Do you agree with that? And given what you said about Reddit's role as sort of a city, how do you envision Reddit's role in supporting the people who are running these self-governing groups?
Yes. So those two ideas, the rules and moderation, yes, are both really important qualities of our communities. And on Reddit, the subreddits have rules. Far and away, the most common rule among our biggest communities is some form of be civil, like be nice. And I think this is a really great example because if we had a platform policy of be nice, or if the government had a law that said be nice, it sounds nice, but it's so ambiguous that it would be unenforceable. But when it happens, when a community says that about themselves, I think people kind of know what it means. It's like the difference between your parents telling you to be nice and your friends telling you to be nice. The latter carries some weight to it. But the other important thing about Reddit, in addition to the moderators and the explicit rules, is the community members themselves and the unwritten rules. So every post and comment on Reddit has voting arrows associated with them. So you can vote the posts up or down. And all of those votes happen within the context of a community. And so the positive affirmation, like the upvote on Reddit, it's like a like or a heart or a retweet, on other platforms, is really common. The downvote is also really important on Reddit. And this is where communities reject behaviors that are not welcome there. It's the online equivalent of, turning your back on somebody in a conversation. And I think this is really important as well. And this is where the community members actually enforce some of the unwritten rules. And I think unwritten rules is like another way of saying culture. And so these communities have, just like community in the real world, distinct cultures. And I think that's what makes the experience so rich.
And so what's Reddit's role then in helping those groups either to build a great culture? What do you envision the role of Reddit in doing that?
So there are, I think, a lot of layers to our work. On one hand, we think of ourselves as like we're stewards of this community of communities. And so we try to, we have what we call our platform values, are the kind of the broad guidelines through which, we run Reddit. And so, these are things like, believe in the good. We at Reddit have broadly this optimistic view of humanity. And I've actually learned this through Reddit, that people, I think, naturally create community, and they are, like, in the right context, are funnier and more supportive and helpful and smarter than actually I think we give the general population credit for. And so a lot of our work is in empowering people, right? In not getting in their way and actually letting them do what they do best. Because I actually think, the premise of this conversation is, can we have healthy conversations online? And I think a really important point to mention is that I think by default, people have healthy conversations, offline and online. Like that's what they want. And so we just have to, I think, enable them to do that.
Yeah,
now, of course, there's one other, actually, there's lots of other layers, but we also work directly with moderators in helping them run their communities. Right, we can give them training materials, connect them with other moderators, help resolve disputes, things like that. We call that peacekeeping, and we do our best. Right, it doesn't always work, but we do our best to kind of support the overall harmony and growth of our communities.
Yeah, it's that's a very optimistic view of people online, and that's a wonderful thing to hear. And I think that's generally true. But can you tell me a little bit about a decision you all made last year where, Reddit for a long time was a place that provided a forum to all ideas. That was the philosophy. And you made a decision last year to sort of ban a couple thousand abusive or sort of openly racist groups, including one called the Donald. Can you talk about that decision?
So what you're referring to is actually a series of decisions. Two things happened last year that actually were not directly related. The last thing you mentioned was the Donald. The Donald was a community dedicated, as the name I think implies, to supporters of then President Trump. And it was a challenging community for us because on one hand, it was first a political community discussing political news. And, we take our role in the, I think, broader public conversation seriously. And I think it's an important facet of democracy, right, for people to share ideas and debate ideas. Now, that community was a problem because they seem to have found a way to break just about every site-wide rule Reddit had at one point or another. And in fact, we actually evolved our rules to kind of meet those challenges. And ultimately, as much as we did not want to remove a political community, we have to put the significance of a political community aside and just say, like, if you're not willing to be good citizens, of our city, like of Reddit, if you are actually working against our mission, which is to bring community and belonging to everybody in the world, then you are not welcome here. Now, last summer, we also made a big change to our content policy and made an explicit policy against hate on Reddit. Now, up until that point, we had, it's not like, hate was allowed on Reddit. But our tactic up until that point was we will outlaw the behaviors that hate leads to that we felt were more objective: harassment, bullying, inciting and glorifying violence. But I think without the literal words, like hate is not allowed on Reddit, I actually think it was causing confusion. Because it was like, we would say, well, technically, it's not in the rules, but we ban all these other things. And I think, in that type of conversation, we don't want to be saying, okay, well, technically. And so we made a big change there. And actually, I think that just simplified the conversation when we articulate, our values and our rules, and also simplified some of the decisions that our teams had to make about whether subreddits were allowed or not on Reddit.
Yeah. So one thing that's obvious talking to people who run subreddits and other groups is that it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of work. Do you think it would be helpful? You think Reddit would have, a broader and more diverse community of moderators if they were paid for the work that they do?
Well, I'll start with I think your middle point, which is the diversity of our moderator base is actually quite broad, right? Because Reddit is quite broad. And so we see people from, all walks of life. I mean, I think our moderator base is diverse by any way that you would measure it. And that's, I think, a reflection of Reddit and the I think, consistent diversification of Reddit itself over the years. So should moderators earn money on Reddit, which is a little bit of, I think, of a different phrasing. Yes, I would love the people who create value on Reddit. So our moderators who create communities, our creators who create content, and the whole ecosystem to actually capture some of that value they create. Now, I think as a matter of practicality, Reddit paying them is actually probably not the right approach. And in fact, we've talked to a lot of moderators and they're like, well, we don't want to be paid. Like, we want that money to go to our community. Now, of course, some probably disagree. But I think it's important that moderators are not Reddit employees, right? That agency they have not being employees is really important. That gives them a lot of leeway in how they run their communities. And I think that's a great thing. So as we look to the future of Reddit, I would love to see our subreddits have business models. And I'd love to see them be able to allocate that money, whether it's to their creators, to their moderators, or to hosting events, or to whatever else they dream of. And so I strongly believe in this future of empowerment that we look forward to also includes economic empowerment.
Yeah. Last question for you, Steve. I really appreciate the time. Can you think of a favorite community, online community, that isn't on Reddit, and why do you like it?
I've got to be honest with you. You're asking the wrong guy. I spend a lot of time on Reddit. That's where I find that's where I find community. And in fact, the communities that I interact with not on Reddit are my friends and family. And I do that through group messaging. And so my other place for community is actually private communities on Signal. And so that's my existence online for the most part.
That counts as a community. Okay, Steve Huffman, CEO and co-founder of Reddit. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. All the best.
Okay, next up. If you imagined a place for civil conversations online, you probably wouldn't think of a Facebook group about vaccines. But Kate Billowitz, one of our next guests, helped start and run a Facebook group called Vaccine Talk, where people are having empathetic and largely informative conversations about their views of vaccines. And I'm also excited to bring into the conversation Claudia Lowe, who has advised the foundation behind Wikipedia. She's extensively studied the work of online moderators, and she's done some of that work herself on places like Reddit and like Twitch, the video game streaming site. So thanks, Kate and Claudia, for joining me.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Shira.
Great. Kate, thank you. Kate, I'm going to start with you. How would you explain what you do with Vaccine Talk that makes it mostly helpful and civil?
So a little bit about what Vaccine Talk is. We are a Facebook group that is devoted to civil evidence-based discussion about vaccines. And that includes childhood vaccines. And of course, now with COVID, we spend a lot of our time talking about the COVID vaccine. And I think what we do that really makes us unique is the fact that we are so heavily moderated. We make no secret of that fact. We do have a lot of rules in the group, but that's really what makes it special. There isn't a lot of other places like Vaccine Talk on Facebook or really anywhere where people can talk about such a contentious topic with civility.
And give an example or two of some of the rules that you have.
Yeah, so the main rule is to keep it civil. And what that means is we don't allow any sort of insulting, name calling, or just any dialogue that you wouldn't have, sitting with somebody at a cafe face to face. We don't want to be a kind of place where people are just going to be yelling and screaming at each other. So that's the main rule. And the second rule is that everything is evidence-based. So if you make a claim in the group, you do have to back that up with evidence. We provide 24 hours to give the evidence to back up your claim. And that way it's fair for everybody. Anybody can participate in the group. They just have to back up what they're saying with evidence.
I'm curious, why does it help to tell people to make a rule that says be nice, right? Aren't people either going to be civil or not? Why does it help to have the existence of a rule?
I just think it cuts down on people who come into the group and just want to troll or just behave badly. That expectation is right there out of the gate. It's our number one rule. They know going into it what the expectations are going to be. And honestly, we're not for everybody. Some people don't want to participate in that manner, and that's fine. There are many other groups out there that are better suited for them.
And Claudia, I'm curious what you think from the work you've done with online communities. What do you think makes the best ones work?
Sure. A little bit of background, I should say. I spend a lot of my time at my day job thinking about communities on Wikipedia, but in my time as a volunteer on the internet, I work with a lot of large-scale events on Twitch, this live streaming site. Most recently, working with an incredible team of volunteers who are behind the moderation team for Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's recent, streams last year of the video game Among Us. And I think what really sets apart is what I would consider a successfully moderated space is approaching that question with intentionality, having a clear idea of what kind of environment and atmosphere you want that space to have. Now, that can be, of course, enforced with explicit written rules, like the fantastic examples that Kate just gave us, but they can also be modeled in the form of acceptable behavior from, for example, visible moderators or other people's well-known figures within the space. If the space is centered around, let's say, an influential celebrity or something like that, having them model accepted behavior, that can be very helpful. So I think that the biggest factor setting it apart is having a clear idea and a clear kind of sense of intention of the kind of community you're trying to build in those online spaces.
Will you tell us about how you went about that with those AOC Twitch streams? Because as you said, right, this is a contentious politician or a polarizing politician. And, you know, those streams kind of broke the internet the day that they happened. What kind of work did you do to make sure that they stayed sort of civil?
Sure. For big disclaimer up front, I am in no way affiliated with her campaign. I handled almost entirely just the moderation side of things in a purely volunteer capacity. So one of the big things is that we managed to put together a really incredible team of experts, and by which I mean that these are people who are both have expertise in handling these large-scale events, you know, that might have hundreds of thousands of viewers show up, in the context of something very different, in the context of sort of these huge popular video game tournaments that have these hundreds of thousands of people show up and participate in this live chat feed, much like the Slack group is doing right now, as well as people who are experts in discussing politics on that same platform. So they understood maybe some of the in-jokes, some of the ways in which people express certain views, but also very crucially, were very up-to-date and very knowledgeable about the ways in which people try to circumvent moderation and filters and try to get past kind of the boundaries of what we had set out as acceptable behavior. So joining those two kinds of expertise was a big way in how we did it. We also did kind of consult her team and kind of ask, hey, what's the atmosphere, what's the vibe, if you will, of the chat that you want to have? You know, do you want it to be? It's a bit of a unique atmosphere in that in an event like that, people are talking so quickly that it's almost impossible to read any single message. But what can come through really strongly is the overall impression of the chat, or the overall kind of sense of what people are care about, sort of the kinds of ways that they're cheering on the action, the ways that they're responding to what the person live broadcasting is doing. That was really important to us. So we kind of sat down and said, okay, we want these certain things to be acceptable, these certain things we should hold for review. You know, if it's held for review, here's our process for making sure we got multiple eyes to think about it and kind of give second opinions. And if we do need to, you know, remove somebody from the space, it shouldn't be permanent. Here's our sort of gradated plan for doing so. And just having that plan in place was really the kind of key for us.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Kate, let me ask you, you know, you spend, this is sort of a labor of love for you running Vaccine Talk. You have a day job, you have a family. Why do you do this? Why do you spend so much of your time and energy volunteering to run this group?
You know, it is very hard. It is a labor of love. We do this because we really care about the mission of the group. And the mission of the group is to be a place where people from, you know, all walks of life and who have very differing stances on vaccines can come together, can have that civil evidence-based discussion. And we've, over the course of the years that the group has been in existence, we've had many people reach out to us and tell us that the group actually helped them become more confident in their decision to get themselves or their children vaccinated. That is extremely rewarding. Honestly, that is why I do this, and that is why my team of moderators do this, because we just want to help people. And it's more important than ever, you know, with COVID happening, this is how we're going to get out of this pandemic. So it's very important to us.
And Claudia, what's your experience? Why do Wikipedia editors, including, you know, professionals in the field, other people who run online communities, why do they do it?
In every conversation I've had the privilege of having with moderators, with anyone who kind of does this sort of work a lot of it is genuinely altruistic. People want to help out. People are invested in certain communities and certain spaces, and want to give back. And sometimes that means, hey, being the person who knows the helpful facts, like, hey, if you want to answer in the certain way, here's the standards for answers that we expect. You know, here's how you kind of, I don't know, for example, like, here's how you would find and present high quality evidence to back up your point, or this is how we would welcome new members to the group. This is how, and kind of like teaching each other. But also sometimes people want to contribute in the sense of like, hey, I have these certain technical skills. I'm really good at programming, let's say automated filters, and kind of can help out there. Sometimes people are like, hey, I live in a time zone that is awake when all the Americans are asleep. I'm going to help you out. I'll take the graveyard shift. And so, very often I found both in my research and in my own experience that there is a strong sense of altruism motivating this. And I think that shouldn't be discounted, that can be a powerful thing. And that recognizing that plus kind of recognition and award is also really important in kind of helping motivate moderators, keeping them kind of free from burnout, kind of helping make a more sort of sustainable moderator ecosystem, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, this speaks, I think, maybe a little bit to that burnout question or sustainability question. I asked Steve Huffman about, would it be better if people who ran online communities were paid for their work? Claudia, what do you think?
I think that my ideal would be to see this kind of community moderation be a viable career. Ideally one that would also be independent from platforms. Often when we're talking about this topic of compensation, we assume that the compensation should be monetary and also that it should come from the people running the platform. And I sort of wonder if we can kind of dream a little bigger and sort of think beyond that. But on top of that, there are a lot of other ways, I think, to build compensation in something as simple as recognizing that moderators are a sort of unique kind of user with unique views and unique needs and perspectives, bringing them into things like consulting them when developing new products, consulting them when upcoming changes to the platform might drastically change their workflows, essentially acknowledging that the work they're doing is important and requires expertise and is something to be respected.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Kate, I'll ask you that same question about compensation, and then also ask you something that Claudia mentioned about there are ways potentially for the internet companies to kind of bring in the volunteer community moderators in other ways. Does Facebook, ask you, hey, we're testing this new feature for groups. What do you think of this? Is that the kind of relationship that you have with Facebook?
Yeah, to touch a little bit on your compensation question, that would be wonderful. In an ideal world, we would definitely be getting paid for the work that we do. But one of the things that I think makes Vaccine Talk really unique is that we are completely independent. We are not backed by anybody, and that's including Facebook or including, major vaccine manufacturers such as, Pfizer or Moderna. We have no affiliation with anything to do with that. And I think that brings authenticity and trust to our members. So in that way, I think being an all volunteer group is really important. And then, regarding your second question, there is a huge opportunity for Facebook to bring on admins and moderators. There are some opportunities in existence currently. There are Facebook groups for admins where they can talk directly with Facebook employees. But I haven't found that to be too helpful currently. It's actually pretty difficult to get hold of a actual person at Facebook. Whenever we've had issues with the group, it has been difficult and time consuming to try to get them resolved. I think it would be wonderful if Facebook could recognize that the admins and the moderators, should have a bigger voice, within their company and reach out to us a little bit more about ideas for how to make Facebook better. I mean, we have plenty of ideas for how we could make Facebook groups run better. So,
okay, what are some of those ideas? Give me one.
Well, I think the main issue that we're having right now is with content moderation from Facebook. And you and I have talked about this a little bit. The community standards are pretty vague. They're not applied in a way that always makes a lot of sense, especially from a user standpoint. I think if I could talk to somebody at Facebook, I would definitely talk to them about how to apply community standards in a way that's a little bit more fair. It seems right now that there's a lot of times where if a human being was actually looking at something, I don't think that the decisions would be made that are currently being made with regards to community moderation.
Okay. And Claudia, what do you think? Are there specific suggestions that you have for Facebook or the other large internet companies about what they could do to better support community groups, online groups?
I think for me, the kind of dream would be to allow these moderators to have a real say in collaborating with product teams. This is shading into my day job a little bit. A real job collaborating with those product teams and software engineers and managers who are in charge of rolling out those tools, that they're going to be the ones that are using them on a daily basis. They may have already created their own third-party tools to kind of step up and fill up this gap in the meantime. And there's a lot these platforms can learn from those people who are actually already doing this work. I think another thing that tends to get left out in this conversation is language support. A lot of these communities don't just operate in English, or not even just with a Latin alphabet. And I've talked to people, on various platforms who are, for example, they're running communities in, say, Russian, who are using Cyrillic characters. And a lot of the tools provided to them by the platform simply don't work for the first few months because it's not using a character set that's being supported. And that just puts an additional burden on what they're doing, kind of trying to do this, high intensity work with tools that don't really work because they weren't built for the right language. So listen to them, come to them in the language that they're speaking, literally.
So I want to ask you both about, we tried our own hand at online community building around this event. We invited people who signed up to join a group conversation with us on Slack. And hopefully you'll see a screenshot of that in a minute. We did sort of prepare ourselves for the possibility that the conversation might go off the rails, but really it has been nice and on topic. And Claudia, I want to ask you if you can explain maybe what we did right.
I think I talked about this a little bit earlier with you all, but I think the big thing is that you set up a clearly defined purpose for the group, right? It's to talk about these certain topics, and you have these certain prompts. It was invite only, which, on the one hand, it restricts how many newcomers can come in, but it does also mean you can more easily sort of vet people coming in if they're trying to come in bad faith, or if, they might cause any issues, you can take them aside, talk to them. I think also a really great thing was seeing those daily prompts and seeing Jim in there kind of talking to people and engaging with people. And it makes it feel a lot less like, someone's just kind of blasting prompts for you to think about. It makes it feel more like an organic conversation, which makes people invested in the community and invested in the space and want to participate in a healthy, respectful manner.
Yeah, and something else that keeps coming up in those Slack conversations this week is people who say they've somewhat lost faith in the ability to have productive and civil conversations in the large public spaces on the internet, including, in Facebook newsfeed, on Twitter. I'm curious, and they're gravitating instead to kind of smaller places, right? Whether it's Facebook groups or Discord chats or these other more intimate online spaces. Kate, I'm curious what you think. Is it possible still to have something like Vaccine Talk, to have productive vaccine conversations in the public news feed on Facebook?
Honestly, I think those conversations really require a lot of moderation. So, and I think that's the main issue with what you see in the comment section on a news article on Facebook or something like that, where it just devolves into not a productive conversation, is that there's really no moderation to those conversations. Their only moderation is the Facebook algorithms, which, are not going to be able to identify really what's happening other than just picking out keywords and deleting those comments. And that's part of what makes Vaccine Talk really special, is that we have the moderators actively participating in every conversation and making sure that those conversations are staying on track. And we also rely on the members to help us with that, by reporting comments, or they can tag modmin and that'll alert us that there's an issue in the thread. And without our members, doing that for us, it would be very difficult to identify where there's a problem. And without a moderator for a group, just in a public setting like that, you don't have anything like that. So unfortunately, the culture of Facebook is a little bit of a, I would say, contentious or argumentative one in the general newsfeed portion of Facebook. So I think that's why we have groups and why we have the communities that we do that create themselves and find each other, because we're all looking for something a little bit more civil.
Yeah, and Claudia, what do you think? If people are spending more time in more intimate settings online, look, there are great Facebook groups and there are awful Facebook groups, destructive Facebook groups. So what's the sort of healthy and potentially unhealthy aspects if people are going to move more out of public spaces online and into more intimate ones?
That's a tricky one. That's the $1 million question. I feel in this entire kind of field. I don't know. I genuinely don't know if there's a snappy answer to this. We've seen a lot of what we'll say a failure to moderate in a timely, appropriate manner at a large enough scale. We've seen what that looks like, and it looks like, hey, how come I got banned even though the stuff that's a million times worse is still, public and up there? It feels unfair. It feels unjust. And at the same time, you hear a lot of stories of especially marginalized folk who are just trying to self-express, who also seem to get censored for no real reason that they can't understand. So transparency is a really big part of it. Trying to get to a state where people understand, when accounts get removed, they need to know, like, who is it coming from? Is it coming from the platform? Is it coming from volunteers? They also need to understand what happened, why it is that content got removed, and if possible, what are the steps to remedy it? And that could be the subject of its own presentation, to be honest.
Okay, well, I guess I opened a can of worms. Unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it there. But thank you, Kate and Claudia, for joining us. Really appreciate your insights.
Thank you very much,
Thanks for
Shira.
having
It's a
us.
pleasure.
Okay, and our last and definitely not least guest today is Latrice Royale. Latrice was a contestant on RuPaul's Drag Race 3 times, and Vulture has called her one of the most powerful drag queens in America. She also has more than 1 million followers on Instagram and about 350,000 on Twitter, last I checked. And she says that fan community is essential to help her get bookings and sell tickets to shows. Latrice, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure. Thank you.
And thank you for looking so fabulous.
Well, I had to give you a little something.
Let me start by asking you, why do you choose to be a human on the internet in 2021? I would not blame any public figure for just saying that you opt out.
Yeah, that has been one of my questions as well. Why am I doing this? And the biggest and most important thing I can tell you is that I love my fans, and they keep me uplifted, and in return, I try to keep them uplifted with positivity and different ways to approach bullying and bad energy on the internet, because it can be toxic at times, and I'm fully aware of the wrath of that with my own experience. But it's all about how you respond. And when you don't give them the response that they're looking for, they move right along. The trolls do. So, I don't want to run. I'm not someone who will run away in the face of adversity. I face it head on, and I conquer and persevere. So I love my fans, and I wouldn't dare leave them.
Okay, so let me ask you to talk about the positive moments, and then I'm going to come back to the less good ones. So what do you think are the secrets for connecting with fans online in ways that are really real and productive and affirming?
Well, everyone loves genuine, authentic, just being real. And that's something I pride myself on. And being able to connect with my fans or somebody I don't even know in a positive way is always the goal for me. Maybe I can touch them in a way that may bring light to something that they never thought about, and giving them an alternative way of coping with problems that they're having. Because I've been through the mill, you know what I mean? I run the gamut of losing everything and rebuilding. And so just being able to connect on a human level and being real and take the celebrity away is what really matters to these people.
And do you ever feel like you want to hold something back? I mean, is the you that's on Instagram or on Twitter, is that you, or are you holding something back?
No, it is me, and I do hold a lot back. I do. because I feel like, you don't need to say everything. You definitely don't need to say everything that you're feeling. And in fact, your feelings are not facts, so it's best to, of course, if you're not feeling so good or you're having a bad day and you just want to express that, and people come to uplift you out of that, that's wonderful. But for the most part, I try to keep what I say to being factual, number one, honest, and positive. These are the things that like I need positivity. And if I don't have anything nice to say, then I'd rather not say it.
So you alluded to this earlier, but I want to ask you about a specific moment when, you eliminated another contestant on Drag Race, and you were the subject of some, really unpleasant trolling and harassment. Can you talk about that, what that experience was like, and what you learned from it?
What I learned from it was that I'm a lot stronger than people want to give me credit for. And, I did not, although I got and I heard secondhand about all the trolling and the things that were being said about me, how my career is over and I'm never going to work again and all this kind of thing. I laughed, I thought it was very comical because I'm like, baby, I built this from the ground up. So first of all, if you didn't give it to me, you can't take it away. That's what you need to learn. And I teach people that all the time. Like, you have to realize that they can't have the power over you unless you give it to them. And so I've never given the trolls the power. And in fact, when I do respond to the trolls, it's with love, kindness, and then they move right along because they didn't get the reactions they were looking for. I'm not about to banter and go back and forth with you. I'm not arguing my case. I'm not pleading with you. I'm not trying to make you understand. And I'm trying to win you over. The people who know me and know my heart, those are my supporters. Those are my fans. Those are my ride or dies. And those are the ones that matter to me. Everyone else, bye, Felicia.
Wait, you said that you heard about some of the trolley stuff second or third hand. Were you did you just stay away from the internet then?
Completely. What the tragic thing that happened was that I let them steal my joy when it comes to loving the show that helped catapult my career. So I completely turned off. I didn't want to see Drag Race. I didn't want to hear about Drag Race. I don't care about Drag Race. And it was horrible because I love Drag Race. You know what I mean? I really do. But what I really come to realize is that, no, that is not what I hate. I don't like the toxic fan base is what I do not like. And I'm not going to let them steal my joy and run me away from the very thing that has got me where I am today. And so I did not watch season 11. I could not tell you what happened on that season because that was too close to All Stars 4. However, since then, after I realized that they're going to be mad at you as long as the show is on, and then once it's over, they move on to something else to be mad at. And that kind of just helped me get through it. I knew that this was going to be ending and it's going to be fine, and had no effect on my bookings. Let's be clear. My work stands for itself. So the fact that I sent a contestant home has no bearing on what I do. So yeah, it's about, finding out what matters and what don't. And a lot of it didn't matter.
Okay. I don't want to fixate on the negative. So can you think of a really positive fan interaction that you've had recently? And yeah, just to leaven it.
Okay, I can tell you that on a daily, I am reaffirmed that there are good, wonderful human beings in this world. And that's what drives me and keeps me motivated to keep doing what I do. Because I get comments and emails and messages all the time about how my story has helped change someone's life and how they are finding and channeling their Latrice to get through this problem. And, that's what it's about for me. And I love having those interactions, and I can't respond to everyone, but I try to. I really do. I try to respond and engage, and keep my fans knowing that, life is great. It's wonderful. It's a celebration.
And is there anything that internet companies, Instagram or others, have done to make it easier for you to engage with fans on your terms? And then is there anything that you think they're falling down on? Anything they can do better?
Well, with these communities like our platforms like Instagram and Twitter, they don't have someone literally sitting at the computer reading all these comments and seeing, what kind of what's the word I'm looking for? Like whether it's a good comment or a bad comment, they can't tell the differentiation of what the topic of the conversation is. And so the bots might just cut you off and erase and delete your comment when it was actually something affirming and positive. And so I think that the guidelines and things like that get a little muddled because there's not a real physical person that can decide whether this is a good comment or a bad comment. I've had some situations where I was really praising another girl and said, yeah, because we use the B word a lot. that's our go-to. And I was like, yes, B and this and that, and you look fierce and that. And then they deleted the picture and deleted my comment. I was like, no, that was a good thing. I was saying she was wonderful. Yeah. So yeah, those are the moments where I wish that there was someone who could make a judgment call on that.
Thank you for censoring yourself on the New York Times, by the way. I appreciate that. Do you think there's anything that the rest of us could learn from the drag world about how to build healthy communities around us, online or off?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's so much to learn. The one thing about drag queens in general is that we're very resilient. We have been at the forefront of every movement, gay, straight, other which way. We're there. And people can learn a lot from us about self-love and acceptance and living your authentic life and being your best self. And there are places and there are forums that are specifically for that. And people are finding their inner diva and they're breaking out of their shells and drag is just for everyone. And I think the world is better with a little glitter on it.
And it's interesting. Roy, who's in our Slack group, said that one thing that's obviously important is that a lot of the forums, the online forums for drag and LGBTQ plus groups, they're often private and heavily moderated, right? Mm-hmm. And do you think that's an important aspect as well?
It's very important. It's very important because, as we know, that it can slide to the left real quick. Everyone doesn't have the best intentions, and so it's great to have someone there to moderate and keep us on task.
Yeah. Latrice, I want to thank you so much for being here. I feel like I want to have glitter to toss in the air, but I don't. I have no glitter. Should. So I will just have to say thank you. Thank you for being here.
You are so welcome. My pleasure.
I appreciate it. And that's it for me as well. I want to thank all of the guests again, and to all of you, especially those of you who are keeping the conversation going in our Slack group. Thank you. I hope we gave you a moment to reflect on online communities, what makes the best ones special. We'll have a video playback of this event up here shortly so you can watch it again or share it with a friend. And I'll just make a selfish plug to sign up for On Tech, the newsletter that I write. You can find it and all the other fabulous New York Times newsletters at nytimes.com/newsletters. Thank you for your support. Bye.
Hi, I'm Nikita Stewart.
I'm Albert Sun.
Hi, I'm Emily Weinstein.
I'm Carlos Tejada.
Through my work, I explore the intersection of policy and race and inequality.
I help the Times track the vital data of the pandemic, recording the numbers of every case and death in each county across the U.S.
In my work, I want to use food to tell you stories about the world, and I also want to give you something delicious to cook for dinner.
I explore the rise of China, India, and the Asian region.
One thing I never lose sight of, no matter where my job takes me, is that it's readers like you that make it all possible.
So on behalf of myself and all of us at the Times, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for being a subscriber
and supporting the work that we do every day.